September 9, 1976. Beijing, China. Mao Zedong, leader of the Chinese Communist Party, has just died. His funeral is that of an emperor. His plan to modernize China fast caused the greatest man-made disaster in history. Up to 50 million people starved to death. In 1976, China has a population of 930 million. It is an enormous country, yet its economy is worth barely half that of the Tokyo metropolitan area. It is the greatest concentration of poverty on the planet. 90% of its citizens survive on less than $100 a year. They live on farms and in slums, in unhygienic conditions, without running water or electricity. Many are stunted or chronically malnourished, thin limbs, swollen bellies, without teeth. Many are illiterate. Many die from basic diseases. This is Mao's great achievement. A man willing to pay any price to sacrifice anything and anyone, except himself, just to prove to the world that communism could work. The Chinese Communist Party briefly intervened to stop him and repair the economy. Mao, afraid China might turn capitalist, unleashed the Cultural Revolution in return. Schools and universities suddenly closed. Historical buildings demolished, artwork and books burned. Tens of millions of people were persecuted, including party members. Arrested, tortured, made to disappear. Among the victims, party member Deng Xiaoping, close to Mao since the early days of the Communist Party, purged twice for not being communist enough, is arrested with his family. His son, thrown by the Red Guards from the fourth floor of a building, left paralyzed for life. Deng Xiaoping comes to power in 1978. Before him, a country trapped in poverty and fear, destroyed by its beliefs, yet absolutely convinced it is doing the right thing. Not ready to listen, even less ready to change. It doesn't matter whether the cat is white or black, as long as it catches the mice, he will say. Through a pragmatic approach, he will persuade the Communist Party to open China to the world, unleashing the fastest and largest economic transformation in modern history, and setting the country on a path from the world's largest slum to the modern-day superpower that China is today. This is Deng Xiaoping, the architect behind modern China. Deng Xiaoping's first real problem is not how to fix China, but how to escape Mao Zedong's legacy of bad decisions, which prevent the country from growing. Criticizing Mao is equal to criticizing communism. If he criticizes Mao too much, he risks destroying the legitimacy of the Communist Party itself. So Deng Xiaoping uses Mao's own words against Mao's legacy. Practice is the sole criterion for testing truth, and seek truth from facts. If what Mao did worked, keep it. If what Mao did not work, then change it. Mao was 7 parts right and 3 parts wrong, Deng would argue. He honors Mao for founding the People's Republic of China, uniting it under Communist Party rule after World War II. But practice has proved that many of his economic policies did not work, so they have to go. Deng criticizes those within the party who support poor socialism, arguing that socialism cannot endure if it remains poor. China, he argues, can prove that socialism works only if it produces better results than capitalism, improving the lives of its people in material ways. So he begins where Mao had left ruins: education. Deng restores the Gaokao, the National University Entrance Exam. Schools and universities reopen. 9 years of compulsory education are established. Intellectuals, once persecuted under Mao, are now encouraged to study hard and use their knowledge to improve China. Aware that the Chinese people need a modern education to develop a modern country, Deng creates scholarships for students to leave China and study abroad. He knows he may lose them. The West is rich. Many may never return. Yet if even a small number come back, for him it is worth it. When asked by his father in his youth, "Son, why do you want to go study in France?" Deng replied, "To learn knowledge and truth from the West in order to save China." Now in his old age, that humility is still there. He is ready to admit mistakes, and he is ready to admit something Mao never could. China is backward, and it must ask the world for help. Japan, previously treated as an enemy because of its crimes against the Chinese people during World War II, now becomes a model. Deng's visit to Japan rehabilitates the relationship between the two countries. Deng is not here to forgive history. He is here to understand how a once-destroyed Asian country became an industrial giant. In 1978, Japan produces cars, electronics, ships, and machines. Its economic output is so vast that it represents roughly half of the entire economy of Asia, despite having only about 4% of its population. In South Korea, dictator Park Chung-hee, through education, state planning, exports, and heavy industrial policy, is transforming Korea into an economic power. In Taiwan, Deng sees another Chinese society, smaller but richer, industrialized, and backed by the US. In Hong Kong, Deng is amazed by how Cantonese and Chinese people under British rule have become extremely rich through trade and global connections. In Singapore, Deng is impressed by Lee Kuan Yew, an authoritarian ruler leading a small Chinese majority state, working with the West, attracting capital, keeping order and cleanliness, and turning a tiny island into a global financial hub. In the USA, Deng sees the full power of the modern industrial world. Universities, laboratories, factories, computers, airplanes, and management systems. He visits American factories. He understands that China cannot modernize by staying closed. Through reform and opening up, Deng opens China to the world. To the party, he presents it as a communist policy, almost like Lenin's new economic policy. China, he argues, is still in the first stage of socialism. Before socialism can truly prove itself, China must first build the economic base to sustain it. Capitalism will be allowed to run, but not to rule. The country will remain communist, he insists. So Deng opens China, but not all at once. Inspired by the Shannon Free Trade Zone in Ireland, Deng creates small economic laboratories on the coast: Shenzhen near Hong Kong, Zhuhai near Macau, Shantou in Guangdong, and Xiamen across from Taiwan. Inside these zones, taxes are lower, bureaucracy is lighter, local authorities have more autonomy, and factories can produce for export. Businessmen from Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and the overseas Chinese world, eager to access China's cheap labor and its future market of almost 1 billion people, quickly jump in. Foreign capital flows into these cities, bringing technology and business knowledge. The backlash inside the Chinese Communist Party is enormous. Deng is accused of poisoning China with capitalism, but Deng argues that no policy is socialist or capitalist by itself. What matters is whether it works. Domestically, the same logic applies. Since Mao's time, farmers had been forced to work on collective land and deliver quotas to feed the cities, while the cities were supposed to provide industrial goods in return. But in 1978, in Anhui province, some villages are discovered breaking the rules. Instead of farming collectively, they organize production by family, deliver the required quota to the state, and secretly keep or sell the surplus. Under Mao, they would have been sent to prison. Under Deng, the experiment is allowed to continue. When production rises, because farmers finally have an incentive to work harder and keep what they produce, first it spreads from village to province. Then from the province, it becomes the new standard for all of China. This is Deng's method. Before punishing something because it looks illegal, foreign, or capitalist, let it run. If it fails, stop it. If it works, expand it. Local governments are pushed to repeat the same process. Experiment, then expand what works. What Deng calls crossing the river by feeling the stones. In 1979, shortly after returning from the United States, Deng Xiaoping orders the invasion of Vietnam. Officially, the goal is to teach Vietnam a lesson and pressure it to withdraw from Cambodia, where Vietnamese forces have just overthrown Pol Pot's regime. The war, however, sends a wider message. China will not tolerate the expansion of a Soviet ally in Southeast Asia, and it wants to show the US that China is now on its side after America's defeat in Vietnam. China fails to force Vietnam out of Cambodia. The campaign ends in a stalemate and exposes how outdated, poorly coordinated, and underprepared the Chinese army really is. Deng turns this failure into an argument. If China wants to become powerful, it cannot rely on a huge army of poorly trained soldiers. So Deng cuts around 1 million troops from the People's Liberation Army and redirects attention toward quality, modernization, education, technology, and discipline. In the 1980s, in Chinese cities, state factories that once guaranteed employment for life, the so-called iron rice bowl, begin laying off workers to increase efficiency. Small shops and street vendors appear. Farming production rises. In the villages, Small factories begin producing tools, clothes, and everyday objects at scale. China becomes more productive, but also more unequal. Some regions will have to become rich before others, Deng says. The layoffs create inequality, unemployment, and crime. Economic openness also brings Western culture, fashion, music, and new habits. In 1983, Deng Xiaoping launches the Strike Hard Anti-Crime campaign, a brutal crackdown on crime and social disorder. About 30,000 are sentenced to death, sometimes under very broad charges such as hooliganism, a label that can include crime, having sex with too many partners, dressing too Western, or behaving in ways the state considered morally corrupt. During Mao's era, Chinese women had on average 6 children. By 1978, fertility had already fallen below 3. Even so, the party fears that population growth will put too much pressure on the economy. So under Deng, China introduces the one-child policy. In the countryside, some exceptions are allowed because families need children to work the land. In cities, however, before marrying or having a child, couples need to obtain a permit from their work unit, a Mao-era system that continues under Deng. Because many couples will prefer sons over daughters, since sons are seen as more useful for work, family continuity, and old age support, many pregnancies with girls will be aborted, especially as ultrasound technology spreads. Over time, China will develop a massive gender imbalance, around 30 million more men than women. Women found pregnant with a second child without a permit will be forced to abort or punished with heavy fines. The most extreme case will appear in the 2000 census, when Jiangxi province reaches 138 boys for every 100 girls. Deng also negotiates the return of Hong Kong from the UK and Macau from Portugal. Hong Kong will return to China in 1997. Macau will follow in 1999. For the next 50 years, both territories will live under the formula of one country, two systems. China regains sovereignty over them, while Hong Kong and Macau keep their capitalist economies, legal systems, and way of life instead of being immediately absorbed into the mainland. By the mid-1980s, China is changing at enormous speed. There are markets, there are private businesses, coastal cities are growing extremely fast. In 1984, China opens 14 more coastal cities to foreign investment. But with growth also come corruption, inflation, and the children of Communist Party officials taking the best part of the new economy. This creates a new problem for the Communist Party. Once people are allowed to think economically, they also begin to think politically. Students start protesting. Human rights activist Wei Jingsheng asks, if China has prioritized the 4 modernizations, agriculture, industry, science and technology, and national defense, why not add a 5th modernization, democracy? If China can reform the economy, why not reform the political system? He is jailed. Inside the party, Hu Yaobang is admired by students for being more tolerant, more open. Zhao Ziyang, in the meantime, becomes the face of economic reform, more markets, more openness, and a softer attitude toward student demands. But to party conservatives, this is dangerous. Hu Yaobang is forced to resign in 1987, blamed for being too soft on student protests. When he dies in 1989, students gather in Tiananmen Square to mourn him. That mourning becomes a protest. At first, the protest is not one single movement with one single demand. Some want democracy, some want freedom of speech, some want action against corruption and inflation. Some want the Communist Party to listen. But day after day, the crowd grows. Students, workers, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens all join. Tiananmen Square becomes the place where all the contradictions of Deng's China meet. A richer country, but not a freer one. An open economy, but a closed political system. For Deng, this is the limit. He can accept markets, foreign capital, private business, and inequality. But he cannot accept a movement that challenges the monopoly of the Communist Party. In June 1989, the army enters Beijing and crushes the protest. Up to 2,600 people die. Zhao Ziyang, who opposed using force, is placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. After Tiananmen, Deng loses momentum. Jiang Zemin becomes general secretary, and the party begins to blame Deng's reforms for bringing chaos to China. Deng slows down. China now stands at a crossroads: retreat into Mao's shadow, or keep opening up into an unpredictable future. After the 1989 Tiananmen Square incident, the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank suspend lending to China. Foreign investors become nervous. For the first time since reform and opening up began, China's future seems uncertain. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapses. For China, this is terrifying. The Soviet Union had been the first communist state, the second largest economy in the world, and the model China was once supposed to follow. To many inside the Chinese Communist Party, the lesson seems clear. Open too little, and China returns to poverty. Open too much, and it may collapse like the Soviet Union. So the party chooses to slow down reforms. In 1992, at the age of 87, physically fragile but still politically powerful, accompanied by his wife, 4 children, and several grandchildren, Deng Xiaoping sets out on a journey from Beijing to southern China. In Wuhan and Changsha, he warns local officials that China cannot survive by moving slowly. Reform and opening up must continue. Development, he says, is the absolute principle. In Shenzhen, one of the 4 special economic zones he had created, Deng sees the proof of his experiment. In the 1970s, Shenzhen had been a fishing town of roughly 50,000 people. By 1980, it had become a city of 330,000. By 1992, it was already a metropolis of 2.7 million. In just 12 years, its population had grown 8 times. Its GDP had grown 120 times. Its industrial output had grown 360 times. The city is growing so fast that the Guomao skyscraper, a 160-meter tower with 50 floors, in 1992, the tallest building in China, is built at a pace of 1 floor every 3 days. This becomes known as Shenzhen speed. To the Shenzhen government, Deng says, "Be bolder in carrying out reform and opening up. Dare to experiment. Do not act like women with bound feet." Along the tour, he repeats, "It does not matter whether the cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." China, he says, should do more and engage less in empty talk. It should learn from Singapore. In Zhuhai, Deng speaks to military and party leaders. Those who do not support reform, he says, should be removed from leadership. He also visits high-tech companies and repeats that science, technology, and overseas Chinese talent are essential for China's future. His visit to Shanghai, much like his visit to Shenzhen, protects the stock exchanges of Shanghai and Shenzhen. To those who say that stocks are capitalist, Deng answers, "I will study carefully to determine whether stocks in the stock market are good for socialism or not, or whether they belong only to capitalism. This also means that we must first try them out." At first, the party and the media almost completely ignore him, but eventually the party gives in, and his journey is shown on national television. His supposed catchphrase during the Southern tour, "To get rich is glorious," unleashes a new wave of personal entrepreneurship that will continue to drive China's economy for decades. In 1992, this simple tour of an old man visiting his own country reassured foreign investors and saved China from closing down again. In 2000, China surpassed Italy by GDP. In 2001, it entered the World Trade Organization. In 2002, it became the factory of the world, the country with the largest exports. In 2005, it surpassed France. In 2006, the United Kingdom. In 2007, Germany. In 2010, Japan. And in 2021, even the European Union. Shenzhen itself grew from 2.6 million people to almost 18 million today, becoming the Silicon Valley of China. China became unrecognizable compared to what it had been just 3 decades earlier, with people often comparing its cities to cyberpunk worlds. But Deng Xiaoping would never see this. In 1994, his health worsened. He could no longer walk for more than half an hour without support. In 1997, after a lung infection and years of Parkinson's disease, he died at the age of 92. The state broadcast a simple funeral. He leaves behind no cult of personality, no grand portraits, no statues. "No man can achieve anything without the help of others," he once said. Jiang Zemin would later honor him as the man who created socialism with Chinese characteristics. While Mao Zedong was embalmed and given the funeral of an emperor, Deng Xiaoping's body was cremated. His organs and corneas were donated to research. and his ashes were scattered into the sea by his wife, like those of any ordinary man.